Leadership Live. I am Rigo Murillo, and I am joined by my wonderful co-host,
Lorianne. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Again.
I'm excited.
And
Luke
we brought
Layman.
back, we brought back a guest from the past. We heard you wanted to hear more from this man. So here we are. We brought him back on.
So we're going to be getting in some things. Better choices, Lorianne.
Bigger chances.
There it is. So don't go away. This is going to be a good conversation. We had about a 20-minute pre-log by accident, and maybe we'll share that as bonus. But anytime we're with Luke, we always have a great time, great conversation, and tons of information that's going to feed you what you need to get your business moving this year. We'll be right back in the next few seconds with Luke Layman. Talk to you soon.
Well, hey, Rigo.
Hey, Lorianne.
I'm excited about today's show and having Luke come back for another conversation. But before we do, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about what you do?
So our business helps take your company's ability to leverage your personal brands and your company's message, creating those personal relationships and establishing trust all organically through an inbound lead process. So anyways, we've got a mission this year to take 1,000 small entrepreneurs and solopreneurs and help them make their first 100 grand. We cannot wait to implement this and show you the new program. And that is what we do. It's part of what we do, but we'll get into that more a little bit later. Lorianne, why don't you share your specialty?
Thank you. I actually help small businesses, coaches, consultants leverage speaking opportunities. There's like over 7,500 speaking opportunities every single day. And some of those are filled with your ideal clients. So speaking helps position you as the expert, pull in the right clients, and monetize your authority.
Speaking of that, Donnie, why don't we go ahead and bring Luke in, and let's give him a round of applause.
Yes.
An expert in the field and also a public speaker, Luke Layman. So, hey, you know what? When we did our show with you last time, we had your clips coming up as one of the most requested top clips internally, externally. We've had a lot of fun with it, so we could not wait to bring you back. I'm so glad that you're here, Luke. Thanks again.
I love it. And, I say I'm excited way too much, but that intro gets me some kind of motivated. It takes me back to like flying airplanes, and it puts that dopamine drop in. Yeah. So I'm ready. I'm ready to do this.
I'm pumped. I can't wait for you guys to see what Donnie's been working on. It's going to be great. Yeah. It takes it to the next level.
We're talking about better choices. Better choices, bigger chances today.
We are. This, I have no clue. So for whoever's listening to this, this could go literally anywhere. I don't know where this is going to go. In the pre-show, we talked about using AI. We talked about what's coming for businesses. Rigo even probably, intimated that we're going to take a little bit of a competitive advantage. We won't call it cheating yet. We're going to say that we're going to take an edge on what the rest of the world's doing because we're going to take bigger chances, and then we're going to start making better choices in our businesses and our lives.
That's it. That's what it's about. And I think really when it comes to business, Luke, everything can be seen in two different ways. You can either look at a point of education and information as, well, it's not fair, or you can use it as leverage. So think about one of the things that you do and how you offer and help a small business owner or somebody who's in this field find knowledge and look at something in a different way, right? They're learning from your story. They're hearing it, and you're opening their mind and their perspective to how they were approaching a problem, right? So if that person took time to listen to this program, to dig deeper into what it is you're saying, go find more information that you may offer on that, and expands their mind, it expands their thought process, it expands their way of problem solving. Is that them cheating, or have they expanded their ability to solve the problem, right? And so you're going to hear people complain about something when they're not willing to take the time, invest, and compete or use new technology, in my opinion, to put them in a better competitive position. And those who have been waiting for a way to expand their expand their knowledge, expand their problem-solving abilities, they're like, finally, I have a way to grow because I couldn't. So two different perspectives, but that's how I see things like innovation. And that's what I love when you talk about better choices, bigger opportunities, because the truth is that's really what it comes down to. Like, you want to grow your opportunities in a business, you have to learn how to make better choices.
Yeah.
You know, so there's so much there, and let's make sure that we only tackle a couple of those things. But I start very simply by saying, well, there's a couple entry points. Number one, if I'm looking at a number on the ground, and I swear to you that the number is 6, and you standing on the opposite side of that, you may have a different perception of what that number is. Now, it's easy for a listener to go, yeah, that's a 9. We know that number could be a 6 or a 9 by the perception that we have of that number. But that easy anecdote gets translated into every decision that we make as a person. And you're talking about cheating, but I come from a background that realistically, we cheat as an aviator or as a defense person. We just call it intelligence. But my idea of getting ahead of the enemy involves having more knowledge about their operations that I can then leverage in my advantage. It sounds an awful lot like cheating. We just call it intelligence.
Oh my God.
I know, that's a beautiful example.
Oh, yes. I'm like pulling up an example right now. It is fairly recent. Let me go back here. I believe it was in the Los Angeles Times, where they had posted a particular statement from a principal of a school that had already put out and said, if you are found using this software to work on any products or, any assignments or anything else, there's massive, expulsion, and there's all these things that we're going to do. And I'm thinking at this going, how did they treat the calculator? Right? I mean, yeah, I'm an electrical engineering graduate. There's no way. Like, I remember going through the process of some of this insane electrical, like, mathematics that I had to go through. I don't even know how I got through it, to be honest with you. I can barely spell my name now. And then I think how I graduated with an EE. And I'm thinking, there was no way. If it wasn't for the calculator, like, I remember my final was a 3.5 hour problem. It was one problem. Like, it was 3.5 hours. I got a C+ in that class. I was like, thank God.
Right. And what did that do for you as an adult, though? Because I have a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old. My 9-year-old is learning multiplication tables, and she's asking me, like, what's 7 times 6? And I'm like, oh, Jesus, don't put me on the spot. Right. I mean, that's a hard one. Yeah. And then I'm like, well, how do I do 9s? I put my finger down and I cheat. But the real point of that is, all you need to know is how to put the input into an Excel document to get an output, or to have a phone tethered to your hip that has a calculator on it all the time. So I think that, the idea of an LA Times principle that says that's cheating is, no, what you're describing to me is the difference between what we would say in the defense world is a good guy and a bad guy. Because when the bad guy is collecting intelligence on us and making decisions, he's cheating. Yeah. But when I'm doing it, it's competitive advantage.
Yeah. So night vision is cheating.
Cheating. Yeah. So for a kid, I mean, what do I really want? And I will tell you now, I don't want to go off on a tangent. We'll ruin a perfectly good show today about leadership and growing businesses and entrepreneurship. But I'll tell you this, what do I want my kids to learn? I want them to learn how to draw a conclusion, to get to the correct outcome in the shortest duration possible.
I love that.
Using the resources that they have available.
That's right. And so how does that differ than in a business realm? If you look at and maybe this is what the topic and the conversation is going to end up getting into, but in terms of what you're sharing and how we look at things as a business. But when we look at something like this new open AI product, what this has done is given small businesses now and researchers and students and many other people a competitive advantage to now be able to create, innovate, and develop ideas that they would have never been able to do competing with the giants, right? Competing with the YouTube analytics, the Facebook analytics, the all of these huge conglomerates that have the data that's able to take content and information and create a strategy to hit the market. Now, a small business that has a really creative and very innovative product can now learn how to leverage this new technology to help them do the same thing. And when I look at that, that is an ability for now someone to create and build faster, better, and solve a problem faster.
Yeah. And they tell themselves a story. Though I mean that's the point of it. Rigo, and I told you I didn't want to derail the first portion, but when I talk to entrepreneurs, I spend most of my time with entrepreneurs and a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old and a wife. But what happens there, and I asked them very simply, and I just had a conversation. I said, is it true? And when I take a statement and I look at the level of truthfulness of the statement, and I'm not talking about whether or not it's dishonest or malicious or misleading or a lie. I'm talking about the complexity and the completeness of the statement. So what you'll see is that people will say AI is bad, AI is dangerous, and they leave it at that. And I say, is it true? And this happens in the entirety of everything that I say in growing businesses. And what's happening is I see that people are using speed as a scapegoat for poor communication. We're just moving too fast. We don't have time to look at that. And I'm saying slow down and look at the completeness of your statement. So when we talk about leveraging AI and someone says, I can't do that, it's not ready, my business isn't ready, or whatever story that they begin to put in place, is that we simply need to slow down and we say, is it true? And that's really the crux of a lot of things that I talk about making better choices, is that we analyze the statement and say, is it true? And is it true for me? And is it true for me now?
So when a business is looking at a situation like this, like the open AI, or they're looking at, let's go back a couple of years. We had a global pandemic. We had COVID. That was something that nobody could predict, but yet there was a handful of companies that completely leveraged and exploded. I'll give Zoom as an example.
Yeah.
Prior to the COVID-19 outbreak, you had all of the other GoToMeeting, you had, all of the other applications out there that were providing meeting services. Zoom had built their entire program to be able to withstand over 100 million plus users. Yet they only had 9 or 10 million. They had built their entire system to be able to grow, scale, and expand to that size and beyond. And it could scale and duplicate that very quickly if need be. And in 30 days, they went from 10 million to almost 300 million users in 30 days.
And talk about having lofty goals.
And they never crashed. They were
ready.
Yes.
They were absolutely ready for when the opportunity was there. So,
and who would have thought, hey, maybe there's this global pandemic where the entire world is going to need to have a digital resource to communicate.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. That wasn't in their plan. They were saying, hey, let's build this to we can scale so we don't have the issue. And what happened? Why did they grow that quick? And Lorianne, great point. All of the other platforms crashed. They've been around for ages. They had the market and they could not withstand the growth. They were all crashing and everybody went to Zoom. And that was it. Zoom became Zoom. Now people don't say, hey, let's go to meeting, right? They say, let's Zoom. Whether they use Zoom or not, Zoomy. It's like, I want a Coke, right? Nobody's saying, hey, let's do, like they say, let's have a Zoom. It's crazy.
You just said it. You said, let me Google it.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
didn't say, let me pull up an internet search browser.
Yeah,
for
let
it.
me Bing it. Let me MSN Bing or nobody's exactly. Let me Yahoo search. No, you're right. Let me Google it.
We're just accepting technology where it's just taking, playing a more bigger role in our lives, and we're just embracing it. And how can we use this to move our business forward to help make our lives easier? That's all that we're doing. It's a choice to accept it.
Absolutely. And I think when you look at it too, to go back to Luke's comments, how we make better choices to get an expansion in our business and have more success. If you look at these businesses and the choices that they made and the preparations that they looked at, they had some of this was, they had to guess a little bit, right? There was a little bit of risk there, but they made educated risk based on what? Like the next step. Where was this going to grow? And we could go back and look at a number of businesses like this. But Luke, I'd really love your opinion on when you talk about making better decisions. What kind of examples can you talk about, like where a business looked at how to make a decision, right? How did they make the decision? Because that's the key to this, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And everything that we do in our life, you do it in your personal life, you do it in your business life, everything has an ROI on it. I'm making a choice right now to spend time with you as compared to any number of hundreds of dozens of whatever it is that I could be doing in lieu of this. And that's the kicker, is that when we find opportunities, that we have to figure out how to rapidly make better decisions and make better choices based on the ROI. And when we do that at a micro scale, so what we're really talking about is the quality of the decisions that we make. And this is the advocation, is that people just rapidly move through it. And they don't actually have a plan for what they're moving forward to. So one of the things that we see often is when I go into an organization, I say, let's take a look at how you're doing. Let's debrief. So we use some of the principles of being a fighter pilot. And we say, let's look at the end backwards. And I say, imagine that we started the project and we go back to the beginning. Tell me what the results you hoped to achieve were. What's the objective? What's the outcome? And I get a smorgasbord of, project engineers, leaders, site leads, the CEO, and everybody tells me a different outcome. And that analogy there is it's no different than a rowboat with a rudder that continually changes and everybody trying to grab bites of the water and pulling in different directions. Vice, starting with an endpoint, whether or not it's unrealistic or not, that's the bigger chances component of this. If everybody's swimming in the right direction, you might as well go ahead and go for a loftier goal. It's just going to take you a little time to get there.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, how does that differ when, someone's coming into the market and saying, like, we want to take this product or service and we want to bring it out to the market? Or are you saying we want to get to this level in a revenue number, and then let's work backwards to find out what problems we have to solve to get there? Is that the comparison? Is that what you're...
Yeah, here's a good example.
Okay.
If you tell me that you want to be $1 billion company, is there any reason that the universe gives any cares in the world against whether or not you become $1 billion company?
None whatsoever.
There is no predispositions for this. There's no reason. There's no impediments. Now, there are steps. There are processes. There will be things that you will have to do and decide and choose along the way. But what we find out, and I'll give you a prime example. Someone said recently that they wanted to complete a project that was going to get them $1 million completion bonus if they could do it in 90 days. And I said, was everyone on the same page that you wanted to get the $1 million bonus? Yes. Okay, then why didn't we achieve it, right? If we had clarity in the outcomes, we have to go back to the processes and say, well, what did we need to do in order to achieve it? And the answer was, well, in order to do it in 90 days, we would have needed to have accelerated our normal processes. Okay, good. How would we have done that? Well, we needed to hire more people to do the things that we already knew how to do well. Good. How much would that have cost? Because if you were going for $1 million bonus on the project completion, if it cost you $1.2 million to get there, it's a poor ROI. If it cost you $400K to get there, it's a good ROI. So when we start out, we say we want to complete the project, get the $1 million bonus in the 90 days of allotted time. My question for you is, did you spend the $400,000? Because that's the concept that has to come first. If you want the thing at the end, you want the result, you have to be committed to taking the actions on the front side that you already know are going to get you there. And in this case, what do you think happened, Rigo?
They didn't make the spend because they weren't all aligned with that.
Fear, chicken shit. Because that $400,000 seemed like too big of an expenditure, too much of a risk, because if they missed the deadline, that $400,000 would have taken them below their operating budget. And the point is, that was their choice. Bigger chances, bigger opportunity, bigger risk, but you have to remain committed and work the plan. Yeah. Nobody cares. I don't care about your business, whether or not it succeeds or fails. I have no vested interest in it, unless I'm putting money in it. Then I care.
Yeah, of course.
But the point is, the majority of entrepreneurs and leaders stand in their own way. If I want to have a better relationship with my family, there is no predisposition that says that I can't have it. I just usually get in my own way.
You're the one who has to make the right, not just better choices, but make the right choices and then stick with those choices. And all of the actions need to follow and just be in alignment with that choice, that, like in that example of having the $1 million bonus. You know, it's like just not staying congruent with the decision.
I was pulling up here. I don't know why I have such a hard time with authors' names, but Jim Collins, Built to Last. He wrote a book, Built to Sell. Loved it. Got into the Built to Last, and it's interesting because he talks about change, and he goes through a ton of different comparisons on these innovative companies, and he talks about how there's all these comparable companies. Like you look at General Electric, and then you look at Westinghouse, right? You know, Westinghouse came in and actually had the right concept in bringing electricity to the public. GE didn't, right? They were the actual ones that had a lot of the innovation really dialed in. And he goes through a bunch of different companies like this, where another one was like Texas Instruments versus, what was the company? Anyways, let me explain what he was talking about. What I loved about it is he said, if you are in business and you don't understand that change is absolutely necessary, being able to go back and make the changes necessary, you're never going to be able to hit this level of growth where you can become innovative. And it was GE had recognized they had the right or the wrong approach. They changed it, but they created something that is long lasting, right? Even though Westinghouse had the original concept, and the list goes on. When I listen to you talk about this idea of understanding as an organization how to be in alignment with a goal, and then filling the needs to hit that goal with the task needed, it's a great way of looking at it versus saying, we're going to up our sales by 20%. Right? It seems to be a much better concept that says we want to grow at this level. So let's work back and recognize what has to be done from an entire organizational level. How can we create innovation? How can we improve cost reduction here? How can we improve, performance on this end? Like, it shouldn't just be, well, we want to grow here. It has to be a unified effort where everybody's working together. And I think that really is what separates very successful businesses from those that are not as successful.
There is a common thread in the lack of success, and it always is the leader. And it's the leader's lack of clarity and their dedication to the process. And I've been saying it on my show, I've been saying it for quite some time, is that it can be no more clear for anyone else than it is for you. Whatever level of clarity that you have, it will be something less for someone else. And that's why, the majority of what I talk about has to do with linguistics and heuristics, the way we speak and the way we solve problems. Why? Mostly because what I'm talking about is persuasion and influence. I'm talking about the way that if I can figure out what your shortcuts are to the way that you solve problems, then I can get in there and I can use your same shortcuts to get you to the right answer. But the lack of clarity from the leadership and the changing directions at the turn of the tide is really what shipwrecks most ships. Is they simply just didn't know which way they were going, and they changed with the tide. And that's what I see all the time as I go, but last year we said that we were going to do this. For you, Rigo, what you just said is if we were going to increase 20%, that level of clarity is if I say to my sales manager, increase 20%, but he doesn't share the same knowledge as I do what the baseline was, it doesn't mean anything. If I say your new sales goal is $12 million because we did $10 million last year, now I have more clarity. But if I can further add more clarity about the $12 million, then he or she can be able to follow in my footsteps, which goes back to, is it true? And that's the continuation of the question that I continue to ask is it true? Is $12 million really your goal? Is 20% really the answer? And what would you need to do to make that thing be more true?
And you continue asking that same question, right? You ask it at every level.
Same question. So growing a business to me is very simple. It truly is. There's market conditions. When you talk about bringing a product to market, I personally would not enter the market in something that's going to compete with the iPhone or the Android. That market's pretty saturated. That's also not the segment that I'm in. But if I'm going to invest in a service-based business and I can go into any market, there is a very specific formula. I call mine the Entrepreneur Accelerator Framework because I have a very specific framework for where I put value add into the business. But if you can imagine an upside down triangle, at the top of it is your 10-year plan. That's your vision. Then below that is your goals, your 1-year plan. It goes down all the way to the bottom to single action items. So it goes for what you're going to accomplish in a week or a day, the KPIs, the OKRs, all the things. But I want to know is, does that task that you do, and this is what I continue to ask myself, is the task that I'm doing connecting via straight line all the way to the top? If I do this thing today, does it get me closer to my 10-year vision? If not, I don't do it. If I can think of a bigger task that would get me further and faster, then I do that task instead.
We were talking about this in another conversation, huh, Lori?
Yeah.
Is it working or not working, right?
Yeah, I mean, like I think that has to be the deciding factor, but it's about, and Luke, you constantly say this about like just taking the pause and just asking yourself the right question. Is this working? Is this moving me towards my goal? Have I communicated correctly? I mean, I keep hearing, like Rigo and a lot of the shows that we do, it always seems to come down to communication. Are we communicating our vision? And, and I also think that's like, are we being honest with ourselves, especially as entrepreneurs, especially as business owners? It comes down to honesty and communication.
You started, Lorianne, the show, and you said there's 7,500 speaking opportunities per day. And I say, is it true? And the question that most people say is, in their mind, they say, well, it's not true for me. And I say, well, that doesn't make it any less true. And then we put conditions and we guard it and we put filters and barriers in between it, but it doesn't make it less true. What's interesting about it, I know Lorianne, you and I have talked a lot about this, is that when we look at, so we talk a lot about stories and the truthfulness of stories, but stories are only there to hold in place a belief that we believe about something. So if I say your sales trajectory is $12 million, that's the expectation for the sales department. That's the story that I'm doing. And the belief has to be that I believe it's possible for my business. So when I look at those belief statements, I look at the individual components of the belief statement to determine how true it is. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking specifically how to make something be more true or more accurate in a more beneficial way that moves me closer to my goals. So I know we're getting a little meta and a little heady on this stuff, but that's the direction. And it just comes down to a simple binary action. When someone says, I didn't get that report in on time, is that true? Is there a version of that could be more true? I didn't get that report in on time. I turned in the report 8 minutes late. Is that more true? That is more true. I turned in an incomplete report 8 minutes late. That is more true and gives me more information about now I can make a better decision, better choices with more information.
I love this. There's a very similar process in a tool called the Stack, or I'm trying to think what Coach Kevin calls it, and I go back to calling it the Stack, but it's a process of understanding. He calls it the spark, and I love how he goes into this, but it's dealing with certain elements that you are battling or frustrated with when you hit this dilemma. And it's saying your given story, right? Is it true, right? Is it 100%? Can you be 100% like guaranteed that what you're thinking, that this person is a jerk? Like, is it true? Yes, it is. He's a jerk. Is it? Or is 100%? Can you say without question, is that person really a jerk? Like, let's talk about really what brought this issue up. And I love that. I've never really thought about this in terms of looking at the steps in your business decisions. And I think as an entrepreneur or as a business owner, as any leader, honestly, if you're willing to break down each step and then challenge it, I think there's a massive amount of learning that we can do and we can really get into it versus a late report versus an incomplete report that came in 8 minutes late. And if we kept going down that line, we would find the root cause, a true root cause that wasn't emotionally driven because we're asking input, output. It's just yes or no, right?
So I actually I just spoke on this week, and to a room full of very smart people in Orlando. And we talked a lot about this. And here's my analogy. If I say as an aviator that my wingman got shot down, is it true? So obviously, your audience probably knows my background is a fighter pilot. If I say my wingman got shot down, is it true? Well, it's probably true because my wingman wasn't there to answer the call. But what can make that more true? Why my wingman got shot down by a SA-8. Now, just for clarity's sake, as anybody's panicking, I never had a wingman get shot down. But if this anecdotal, story
just an example, just an example.
Somebody hemmed me up on this. I gave an example the other day. They're like, that sounds terrible. I'm like, it didn't happen. It's just a story. It's an anecdote. If my wingman got shot down by an SA-8, I might be able to. This goes back to the heuristics and the patterns. Is that we have a tendency to use recency bias, and we blame things on the thing that happened right before either the success or failure. My wingman got shot down by an SA-8. Yes, that is an observation, but it's not the most true because we have an incomplete story. You're not telling me the whole thing. So I want to know what makes it more true. My wingman got shot down by an SA-8 because we had poor intelligence, because we had an unknown threat, because he had an inoperable missile warning system, because he didn't understand the tactics, techniques, and procedures to defeat the missile. Now we're getting to something that becomes more true and more useful and something that I can do. But, Rigo, we can get this back down to practical application. If my kid does not feel connected to me or is acting out in school, I can begin to draw parallels back down to my specific behavior patterns about where I take responsibility and my choices and go, oh, that's easy. I need to spend more time with my child. Now, I just need to take bigger chances. The better choice was allocate more time and energy to the things that needed to do. And now I'm looking for the thing that has the highest ROI. And it doesn't mean spending money. It may mean that I have quality one-on-one time. It may mean that I read a book. But what often happens to close the loop on that is that people blame things on the wrong thing. And when they tell me this happened to me because of that, I say, is it true? And now I become a sniper at each one of those to make sure that you're connecting the correct causation to the correct outcome.
And I'm sure you can challenge it too, because they're going, yes. You would say, are you like 100%? 100%?
The question I always ask is, what makes that more true? It's easy.
like
I can always lead someone to it. What makes that more true?
I love it. Because you can go in your own analogy. You can say, okay, I need to spend quality time with my kid. That right there in itself is a whole nother process. Is it quality time? Is it a conversation? Was it a behavior pattern that I had? Was it something I did wrong? Was it something that's going on that I didn't recognize? Is it something happening? Right? You could dig deeper and really then find even deeper layers to that give more specifics, because in any area, we're still going to have this place of a lack of information as always being our biggest downfall in relationships and business. And every one of my failures, and there's plenty of them in my life, it has always come down to a lack of communication or a failure to communicate. But it all had to do with communication. It's
clarity.
Orion, this is interesting, and you and I have had many conversations about this in the past. And one of the things that you have to understand is that the root of everything that we do in our life. Now, I'll caveat that there are some chemical imbalances. There are some sociopaths or psychopaths that are absent this, but every single thing that we do has a positive intention. Now, if I look at someone who steals a lawnmower so they can go get a crack hit, I may not view that as a positive attribute. But when you realize that the root of that had a positive intention, that person was doing that because they were doing something to satiate an urge or desire, and it was positively intended for them. So the question then becomes, is it the most empowering version, or is it limiting in its nature? And when we can just get more curious with it. Now, Lorianne, we'll get to the point here we talk about individual responsibility and accountability. That's a phenomenal, as we kind of wrap this thing up, as we get into that. But as you recall, Lorianne, we talk about where it's positively intended, and we have to realize that each of those foundations of those has something, some need is getting met. That's the foundation of why we do everything in our life.
Right. It's perception for the person who lost their lawnmower. They're going to have one perception, one view of this, whereas the person who was stealing it so that they could get a hit, they have a different perception of this. And then there's the other.
I was about to say, put the third perspective in it. The guy that got a sweet lawnmower for $20.
And they're all winners.
Hey, I really needed a lawnmower. Listen, I grew up in Southern California. I cannot tell you how many times I was like, yes, I really need that. And that's super cheap. Sure. I'm just going to give you the money. I'm not really caring where it came from because I needed that. And it solved a major issue for me. Like, I remember buying a car for $400. That car didn't last very long. Eventually it had to go back to the police. But I remember at that time, I needed a car, and that car lasted me a couple months. And when I went to go register it, found out that it didn't belong to the person who sold it to me. Now, I was a very young man, but here's the funny thing. That example is perfect. I needed that car. For those 2 months, I didn't have a way to work. That was how I was able to provide income. And so it's really neat that you see that, right? The car was returned. The guy went to jail. It all worked itself out in the end, and the owner got his car back, and I'm sure he got a nice insurance settlement out of it. But the thing is that, when you look at the different perspectives and you look at it, it changes how you identify these things. So now take that and put that into a business, that story, put that into a business perspective for us so that it really resonates with a lot of our small business owners, even large businesses.
Well, and I think this is the crux of it when we come back down to it. Now, you can either look at it in two facets. You can look at it as your own actions or those of your subordinates as you're leading others. But if you realize that the root of all actions have a positive intention, that someone didn't wake up today and say, you know what, I'm going to make some really egregious mistakes, that they have positive intentions, it gives us the opportunity to create some grace. Both for ourselves and for others around us. But what we have to do is we have to be critical of our own actions to say, I know that it was positive intended, but was it the most positive version of the action that I could have taken? Did it move me further? So if I'm going to go do $12 million in sales this year, did this action move me forward? And I know we kind of talked in the pre-show about thinking outside the box, and we started this leveraging, talking about using OpenAI, ChatGPT as a tool. So for those of you who don't know ChatGPT, go Google it. It's crazy. Rigo's on fire about this thing. He'll have a YouTube channel about ChatGPT at some point. But as we look at this, is that you have to get down to your single binary action every single day, and that action has to have the most impact that it can have on the desired outcome. What happens too often is entrepreneurs, for sure, we spend our times doing the lowest, easiest, laziest task instead of knocking away at the big things each day that are going to have the high impact. So what do you get? You should probably end up being compensated like a social media manager or a copywriter or even a bookkeeper if that's your business, instead of the CEO of a company that was growing that business to 10 or 12 or $15 million.
Yeah.
So funny. You're so right. No, you're so right. But it's funny because you were saying, is getting to 12 million really the best benefit for the company? Because I'm thinking about this. If a business, like let's say my business, and I'm looking at mine, if there's a certain potential, there's a certain level of growth where not all growth is going to be positive. Like I even talked to the team about that as we go into this year. I'm not so much looking for a financial revenue growth as much as I'm looking for a profitability shift. I'm looking on how do we take less of our time to create the same amount of money, but increase our profitability. I'm not so worried about the revenue, because a company could say, we're going to move this and we're going to get to that number. But what they could have done is doubled a particular cost of doing business, where that extension of sale didn't actually help the business, it hurt the business, but they didn't ask all the right questions.
So, of course. I mean, and as someone who has done that and grown businesses, there is a very non-linear growth pattern that involves you making less money for having done more work and generated more revenue, but what goes into your pocket is less. So, if you, and this is kind of an interesting thing as we get into a little bit more advanced tactics and business growth, but let's just say, because I'm a service business guy, let's say you do $1 million a year, service business, you got a team of 3, and you're generating $500,000 of personal take-home income. So about 50% owner's benefit. That's good for a service-based business, but it's likely because you're in the business functioning as that person. If you take that same business to $5 million and you have to hire and resource and build a team out to be able to do that, it is fully likely that your personal take-home income plummets below your $100 million level. And it starts to suck when you go, man, I built a $5 million business, but I'm taking home less money and I have more responsibility. And you only have one of two choices there. You got to go up or you got to go back down. And most people just get off the wagon and they don't have the bona fides or the courage to go, yeah, I'll take it to 10, because that's where the true personal revenue starts to come back. But now at 10, you have an enormous amount of time freedom to be able to have the money and the time. So, when I look at it, Rigo, it comes back down to this is it true? I don't know. It's an observation. I've done it. You can do it. Anybody can do it. But when you get to it, you go, do I take the bigger chance? And once I've made the choice to pursue the bigger chances, what choices do I need to make on a daily basis that's going to get me there? A good example, $10 million. I can take any business to $10 million, no problem. The question is just, what do I have to do to get there? Dry cleaner on the corner of whatever in Charleston, South Carolina, I just need 10 of them doing $1 million a year. What does that mean? I need this number of employees. It's not hard math. Can I get that specific location to $10 million? Probably not, but I can set it up and structure it to get to anything. And the question is simply, do I believe it's possible?
Yeah.
And if it's possible, is it possible for me? And if it's possible for me, is it possible for me now?
Yeah. And I was just thinking that it's going to come down to beliefs. Like, is it true? And then right there's your beliefs about yourself, about what holds you back, about what you want to be possible. And again, we're going to come right back down to like, what's the clarity? What's, the clarity on the vision of where you're headed. And too many times, you're right, Luke, just CEOs or entrepreneurs, like it's just muddied. And so that's why they don't hit their goals or why they get discouraged and then they walk away saying it didn't work.
So here's what I'll drop some knowledge for the audience, some fire today, and hopefully straighten this out. If I were to take whatever your goal was, so at the time of recording, we're here in January. If I were to take your goal and say double it, I want you to do whatever you said, $100,000 of personal revenue. I want you to double it. I want you to tell me if it's possible for you. The majority of you listening will say that's not possible for me. And then you will give me some reason that you believe it's not possible. And the root of that forms what we call a belief statement. And I told you that I like the linguistics. And what happens in a belief statement is we take a cause and effect, and then we attach a meaning to it called a complex equivalence. So if I say, I can't grow my business to $200,000 a year because is the cause, and then that gives me the effect. So my market won't support $200,000, and therefore I can't grow my business to $200,000. So the market doesn't support it, therefore I can't grow it. And then we attach a meaning to it. And the meaning is the most important piece of it, which means I shouldn't be an entrepreneur, which means I am a failure, which means I'm not going to reach my personal income goals. And all of that is bullshit. Every single one of it.
Absolutely. This is good. First off,
Truth
I was up to like 2 or 3 fixing some technical things within emails and new CRMs. I'm going to just be completely open and honest as you're sitting there talking about this. I'm like, yes, it's exactly what happened. And it's a little irritating because I actually have paid for somebody to do this and they were not fixing it. And I got tired of waiting and I just did it myself. Now, that's a different subject. I shouldn't have, I know, but I got tired. But one of the things that I love that you just mentioned is, and when I talk to the team, I go, look, when we're coming up with something, I don't want you to tell me why it can't. I want you to go show me how we can. Like, I don't care why we can't. It's always going to be that's not possible. If I haven't challenged you on every single question I've ever asked, we wouldn't be where we are today. Like, we have to do this. I would rather you tell me how it can, and then we will take and evaluate if that's something we can do. Because anything is possible. It's just time and resource. Like, it may not be physically doable in our current state. It doesn't mean it's not impossible, but even that goal becomes, or that number can become a goal, and it's something in itself that we shoot for to hit something, to hit the next, to get us where we want to be. But not going at it at saying, how can we do this versus, well, that's not how that works. That can't be done. That's not what I asked. I told you what I need. I need you to go find me a solution. That's what I asked.
Well, one of the beautiful leadership techniques that I use is to allow someone to displace themselves from the outcome, and realizing that most people have a fear-based response. So when you say, can this be done? Or show me a way this can be done, if there is a connection to inadequacy or failure, that's where fear-based responses come. So I actually relieve that pressure from them by saying, if you were in my shoes, if you had my resources, how would you solve this problem? Or I can take the constraints away and I say, if time and money were not an issue, how would you solve this problem? Because now we get one step closer to what a roadmap to success would be like. And now I come back in a collaborative manner and I say, yes, that is one way to do it. And we can combine those steps and we can apply some resources. So for me, it's about creating multiplicity where those two things can exist simultaneously, and we can move ourselves forward. But I give them a reprieve by taking them out of the mix because I don't need their limitations.
I love that. And by removing the fear from their thought process, it also will allow them to get into a creative space as well. So if they have the ability to expand because they're in that area and they probably have seen some ideas, but they've already said, nah, that's not possible because their mind isn't trained yet to see things differently. You've given them the the okay to be completely creative, completely innovative, and expand and come up with crazy ideas without a fear of that fear complex. You're right. I've seen that happen. I don't know why I haven't laid it out that way, but thank you. I love the reminder.
You said
such
something
a simple change of words.
I think for entrepreneurs, they should do this. Now, you said I did this, and I think that you should, for clarity. I'm not advocating that you don't do things in your business, and I think the delegation is fine. I'll give you a great example of innovation. Is many years ago, I was looking to increase a line of credit inside my business. And I began to go find some consultants that said, okay, how do you do this thing? And somebody gave me a brilliant strategy and said, here's the way that I do it. I create a document that has the banks compete for me. So I'm basically creating a request for proposals from the banks that outlines what my business state is and what my financial needs are. And I give it to them and I say, you have 7 days to give me a response. I say, that sounds great. I would like for you to do that for me. How much does it cost? He said, $5,000. I'm like, you're out of your damn mind, because that is a lot of work that I'm going to have to do to give you all of that data for you to put it back in a template. So to be in integrity, don't send me that document, because I'm going to recreate that document myself and I'm going to send it to the banks. So a lot of what we do is we figure out what's possible for us. And then where we add value as the entrepreneurs is we're the person that figures out how to shortcut it and to make it happen. And the analogy that I give is, kind of goes back to, are you getting paid like a bookkeeper or a social media manager? If I'm flipping houses, where am I expecting to get paid on the house flip? Because if I buy the house and I finance the house and I go replace the carpet in the house and I paint the walls in the house and I list it as a real estate agent, I should expect to get paid as a real estate agent, a tile mason, a carpet layer, a painter, whatever that is.
And they're not.
And they're not. And you're doing all of those inefficiently. Right. So where am I adding value to that? And I go, where I actually add value to that is I buy low. That's the only thing that I do. I find off-market properties, I buy low, and then I delegate everything else. And I do that continually. And that's the challenge inside businesses, is to find the continual place that you can add the most value and do that time and time and time again.
And you know what? What you just stated, you rob yourself from data, very important data you need to understand what truly is your cost of business, your cost of doing business, truly understanding what ability you would have to even be profitable, not to mention you're probably slowing yourself down in many, many areas. I'll talk to you offline about one of the big decisions we made this year, where I have been pretty much in my way the last 3-4 years. And I'm like, well, this is where we're putting our money this year. I'm tired of getting in the way. It's time for us to move into a different direction. I love this. Luke, I cannot thank you enough. There are so many nuggets out of this. I cannot wait to break this down and get this stuff out for our audience and for others to take a look at. Why don't you give us a quick, just a quick plug? Let us know and let our viewers know, where can they find you? Where can they find your content? I really want people to start to get to know who you are. I'm glad I have. And you never, ever come without something awesome for us to take away. So please go ahead.
Well, the easiest way is to go to my website, lukelayman.com. Everything points from there. But, realistically, I'm most active on Instagram. I love engaging and hearing about the challenges that you face. A lot of the content for my show each week comes from the comments that I have on Apple Podcasts or from the comments that I get on Instagram. So this is very fulfilling for me to support and watch the journey of entrepreneurs across the globe and just having massive impacts these days.
I love it. Fantastic. Awesome. Lorianne, you want to give us some final words before we go ahead and let Luke go?
So one of the big things that I'm walking away with, from this show is really, it's like, stay in your role. If you're just starting out, you've got one role, but as your company gets bigger and bigger and you're earning, you're crossing that $1 million mark. I mean, like, you're the CEO, you have to stay in your role and not be the copywriter, not be the bookkeeper, just, like all the stuff that we've been talking about today. And I just also want to give a plug for Luke's podcast, which is Shift Work, and it is excellent. So make sure you check that out.
Awesome. We'll make sure to put the links in. Luke, thank you so much, man. You'll see with the stuff I got at. I don't even know where to start. There's lots and lots of value that I've gotten out of this, and I cannot wait to share. But most importantly, it's really understanding, especially when you're in that, there is a place, there's a growth level for a business that's getting into that high 6 into 7 figure and getting to that next stage. And I believe everything you shared today is massively important for any business owner to understand, but especially for those in that transition, because that area right there really is no difference between 1 to 10, but there is a major growth level that has to happen in order to get out of that and get to the next level. And I've come to realize that myself. It is a very unique place. And what you just shared, every single one of those impact how my business and others like me will be able to get to the next place. So thank you so much for sharing. I can't thank you enough, Luke.
Thanks, Rigo. We'll see you guys soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead and hang tight before you take off. We're going to put you back in the room. Donnie, why don't you get him out? Give him a round of applause. Mr. Luke Layman. We'll go ahead and let Donnie get you out. All right, awesome. Listen, you guys, thank you so much for being a part of the program. We are so grateful that you join us here every week. And we're hoping that you get something out of this content. Like Lorianne was saying, make sure you follow Luke, follow his podcast. We're going to put all this in the details and information for you. But if this matters, if you find this content valuable, share it with somebody. Please make sure to like and subscribe and let us know. Thumb up, share this. That matters to us because it tells us, hey, this content matters to you. And we want you to follow us. And we would love for you to subscribe to our newsletter where we're going to highlight these speakers every single week. We're going to break them down, give you the bullet points, give you access to all these videos, and let you know about our next speaker the following week and how to subscribe and get ready for that show. So, Lorianne, anything before we get out of here?
No, I think this has been a great show, but definitely we will see you next week.
Absolutely. God bless you guys and talk to you next week. Same time. See you later.